Hello and welcome. I'm your host, Joe Healy. The quarterfinal round of the SEC tournament gets you ready for the semifinal round, semifinal Saturday we have today. Early start, by the way. I'm sure you've seen it by now, but all right, there we go. We're going to roll with the hotspot on my phone for the time being. How about that? Just internet situation has not been great at this to be unnamed hotel, because other than that, my stay has been great, and I don't want to disparage said hotel. Where was I? Going to recap quarterfinals. We're going to take a look at semifinal Saturday at the SEC tournament. Like I said, 10 a.m. start for Vanderbilt and Tennessee, trying to get ahead of some weather here in the Hoover area. And as I look out my window here, it doesn't look imminent, but it's just a lot more cloud cover than there has been. We've had a great week of weather out here. So this is the first time we've really had any sort of threat since that first night when they pushed A&M Mississippi State to the next day. So real quick before we get started, I have to remind you that this episode of Weekend Waypoints and every episode of Weekend Waypoints is brought to you by Academy Sports and Outdoors, which is your new home for Jordan Brand. Gear up today and take flight. Make your play in the latest head-to-toe Jordan gear for the entire family, available in-store and at academy.com. Unleash your greatness with Jordan Brand, now at Academy. All right, folks. Apologies again for the internet issues if we have them intermittently here. Been on a pretty good run this season of not having too many hotel Wi-Fi issues, but alas, here we are. James Gillum says, Joe, I'm in line to get in, but just curious, Carolina, a 1-seed or a 2-seed? James, I have bad news for you. I don't know quite how to say this, but I don't think they're making it, my friend. I think they're gonna just miss out. So I apologize for that. Drew Alvarez says, how about them Tigers? Ianson coming out of the bullpen to shut it down. Yeah, that was Jay Johnson went with Anthony Ianson out of the bullpen behind Cade Anderson, and they were, I can imagine, it was a great combination. They struck out 16 between the two of them. Jay talked in the postgame about wanting to that was the plan going in, was to piggyback them off each other. I think if nothing else, it kind of, make sure they both got work, because you don't know how long you're staying here, right? And that was a one-run game between LSU and A&M. So if A&M had won that game, obviously LSU's going home, and they otherwise would have been in a situation where they wouldn't have gotten work for Ianson, right? If they just gone traditional Anderson into the bullpen. So to answer your question, Nicholas Doherty, was LSU trying? I guess I could actually put it on the screen, couldn't I? Was LSU pitching both their 1 and 2 more of trying to plan for next week, or they needed this win to stay in the top 8, in your opinion? I think it was more of the former. I think it was more, they wanted to make sure they got their guys' work and kept them as sharp as possible, just in the event that, hey, one swing could have changed that game. And it almost did. Oh, by the way, there was a play, middle innings, I think. I can't remember exactly what inning it was, where we had the classic runner interference thing at first base. The double base has mostly fixed this, but Ben Royo, a little tapper in front of the mound, throw up the line, but he was running inside the runner's lane. So the play was a throw that got away from Hernandez and Jared Jones up the right field line. Run scored, would have made it a 4-4 game. Instead, the run comes off the board. It's an out. And so, that's a play that, has mostly been eradicated because of the double base, but we saw it again yesterday, and it unfortunately for A&M, it ended up hurting them. But so to answer the question, I think it's more the former of just like, let's make sure we get both of them some work. Let's make sure we keep them as sharp as possible. I don't think LSU was too worried about the top 8 part of it, just because I think, if you win that game, hopefully that takes care of it itself. But maybe that was part of it. I can't say for certain, because we're not in Jay Johnson's brain, but I think it was more the former than the latter. Let's continue on with that game. Then we'll go back to Ole Miss, Arkansas, since we're already here with LSU and A&M. I think the big story was Jace Laviolette playing. One day after breaking his hand, basically 24 hours after surgery, there was some confusion. It was being said on social media that he had surgery yesterday morning. Actually, the surgery was last night, around 7, not this morning around 7. Or the yesterday morning, you know what I mean? But it was being reported as this morning. I think there was some confusion, but it was the previous night. He went straight from the ballpark to go get surgery done, more or less. And so he played, and honestly, he performed a heck of a lot better than I assumed he would with a broken hand. His first at-bat was not great. 3-pitch strikeout against Cade Anderson, but it's Cade Anderson, so like that happens to a lot of guys. But looked pretty good the rest of the way. Somehow managed to hit a ball 104 miles an hour with basically 1.5 hands on the bat. So impressive stuff, really gritty performance. I think he, not that he needs it because he's an incredible player who's going to get drafted really high and whatnot, but he earned a lot of respect. Again, not that he needs it, but it's impressive, gutty thing to do. I think a lot of guys think they would, and look, I don't know, I was never a Division I baseball player, but I think a lot of guys think they would play in that situation. But the reality of how much that hurts, and that the trauma of that situation, and having to have the surgery, and the realization that hey, your season might be coming to an end, and oh, by the way, your career might be coming to an end. Like, I think all of those things combined make it to where I think a lot fewer of us than we think would be eager to jump into the fray there with a broken hand. Other things, what do we got? Obviously, in the big picture, A&M almost certainly done, barring a massive surprise from the committee, which you can't rule out. And there's an argument to be made for it. I don't necessarily agree with it if they were to be put in, but I think you could make a cogent argument. It would be just surrounded by the argument would be centered on the quality wins. Their quality wins are going to stack up against all the bubble teams they're going to be compared to. But the RPI is problematic. I haven't looked this morning at where it is. Let me scroll here. Yeah, 50 in RPI. It's a 9-17 record in quad one, so it's not even like it's 9 quad one wins, but you only won a third of those games roughly. So it's just short. But you could, if you really wanted to stretch, you could, if you wanted to really use the argument that they existed in this league that's head and shoulders above everyone else, and managed 13 conference wins if you include tournament wins. You can make that argument. I just don't think it's going to get made and ultimately get in. LSU moving on to take on Ole Miss, because Ole Miss won 5-2 against Arkansas on Friday. Jumped out to a 5-0 lead in the first on Zach Root, and just like a bolt of lightning. It was just like all of a sudden you look up and it's like, whoa, it's 5-0. And that was all the offense Ole Miss needed. Austin Foley with the big blow in the first inning, a 3-run home run that really sent Ole Miss fans into a frenzy. It was a great atmosphere all day yesterday, huge crowds. No surprise with four big name programs, four enthusiastic fan bases playing. But Foley's 3-run home run was a 17th of the year. I don't think I knew he was having a really good year as a run producer. I did not realize he had 17 home runs. Leads the team, one ahead of Judd Utermark. So good swing there for Foley. He's been such an impact guy for them this year, kind of unsung. He, after a few years as a backup at Kentucky, goes to Ole Miss, and the starting job, oh, by the way, is not guaranteed when he comes into Ole Miss. Campbell Smithwick's still there. He was going to have to compete for the job, and he did. And then when Smithwick, it wasn't putting it all together, Austin Foley gets his opportunities, and he's just run with them. I mean, he's not just running, he's sprinting with them, and has been a huge part of it. He thanked Coach Bianco in the postgame press conference for the opportunity, and Coach Bianco smiled and patted him on the back and said, "You're welcome," because I'm sure Coach Bianco is as excited to have him as Foley is excited to have had the opportunities. So that's obviously been a situation that's really worked out for all parties involved. Great work from Riley Maddox, who's been pitching really well as of late. I put it in my story last night, but I think 4 of his last 5 or 5 of his last 6, I forget what the exact ratio is, but have been starts where he's given up 2 or fewer runs, 5 or fewer hits, 2 or fewer walks. He's getting deeper into games than he really has been. So that's impressive stuff. And Mike Bianco made the point of that rotation, which is Hunter Elliott and Riley Maddox and Mason Nichols is bigger reason that Ole Miss is where it is than anything else this season. That's an old rotation. Those are guys that were on the national title team 3 seasons ago. And so that kind of continuity, that kind of experience in the rotation is rare in the SEC, certainly, but just in college baseball generally, especially in this era. So look, there are more talented rotations, certainly, but there aren't any with that much experience. And that this time of year, that stuff matters. And I think we're seeing it right now, but they're just old all over the place too, right? I mean, the outfield, Mitch Sanford, Isaac Humphrey, Ryan Moorman, all senior transfers, Judd Yearmark, veteran, Luke Hill's a 3rd-year player. I mean, he seems like the young guy, right, in a lot of cases, but 3rd-year player. So just a lot of experience all around. And now they're in a situation where I really like their host resume. I think there's a very good chance they're playing baseball at home. Shout out to my friend of the program, Chase Parham of Rebel Grove, who wrote a piece that kind of drew my attention again to Ole Miss's case. I had been kind of a little more lukewarm on Ole Miss's hosting chances, and I think a large part of it was because I was a cliffhanger there. A large part of it was because their RPI was kind of coming into the week. It had been 17, 18, 19, kind of in that range, and historically the committee has clung pretty tightly to the RPI when it comes to hosting. And so I'm just kind of what's the word I'm looking for? Just kind of I don't know the word, but just like I'm so used to that, I guess, that scared off by that I had trouble seeing it. But 2 things are definitely true now. One is like I needed to take a fresh look at the other metrics, and right now Ole Miss has the most quad 1 wins in the country, 18, and they're 18-14 in those games. It's not like it's 500 or worse. So really strong from that standpoint. And now also, by the way, the RPI is up to 16. So they're right there. Now you might say, well, that doesn't make a lot of difference, but look, I mean, history just suggests that the committee is very married to RPI, and J.R. Teagues, the committee chair, has gone out of his way to say that, the RPI is a tool, not the tool. We're going to take all the data into consideration. And I believe him, by the way. Before I've just been burned by this before, where we're led to believe that RPI is not going to be the be all end all. And then you look at the field and it kind of feels like it was, right? So I'm just going to need to see it. And I hope that's the case. But yeah, it's just a strong hosting resume. So I like Ole Miss playing baseball at home and for there to be beer showers at Swayze Field here in June. Arkansas, of course, still a top 8. They're fine. Dave Van Horn said in postgame that, maybe we would have liked to have played with the new format. Maybe we would have liked to have played at least one more game. And he's like, and we wanted to win the thing because, to his point, with this format, they would have only needed to play 3 games to win the thing. So, same with LSU on the other side. Like, and that's obviously an advantageous position. So they maybe felt like they needed a few more innings at least, just maybe another game to get some guys more work, but it is what it is. They're headed home. At least they will get the extra rest. But Arkansas top 8, no question about that part of it. All right, quickly, we'll talk about semifinals. We'll circle back to some questions and we'll get you guys out of here. Ole Miss and LSU. Well, actually, let's do Tennessee Vanderbilt. That's the first game. We'll do them chronologically. Tennessee Vanderbilt, 10 Central, 11 Eastern time. I saw questions about Tennessee's hosting in here. Yeah, I think at this point, not only are they a host, I think they're probably pretty safely in as a host right now. I'm assuming there'll be another projection at D1 baseball today at some point. I'm assuming they're doing that this morning. I'm not a part of that, so I can't say specifically, but I assume that's going to be happening. So yeah, I really like where they're at there. Vanderbilt, I think, is in an advantageous spot because they've only played one game. They used Sawyer Hawks in that game, but they still have a lot of bullpen left. But there was Tennessee had an off day, so they've got most of their options too. I mean, maybe Arvidsson is not available, right, because he threw a bunch in that game. But otherwise, I think most everybody else should be available for at least a little work. So I think I don't think there's a ton of stakes here. I think Vanderbilt's a top 8. I think Tennessee's a host. But because of the rivalry aspect of this, I do think that it's going to be I do think that it's going to be a really hotly contested game that has some juice, just because of the rivalry piece of it, right? And state pride and all of that kind of stuff. Ole Miss LSU. Cade Townsend on the mound for Ole Miss. Mike Bianco mentioned in postgame yesterday, Mason Nichols dealing with a little bit of a tender oblique. So they just left him off the roster for this week because, before you go, you have to make your roster decisions. And he said they just felt like with where they were, it just wasn't worth the roster spot on the off chance he could throw. It's just safer to leave him off and let him rest it and make sure that he can be good to go moving forward. So Cade Townsend will get the start. TBA for LSU. I'm assuming it'll be kind of an all hands on deck. We'll probably see Casey Evans, Chase Shores, Zach Cowan, like that, subset of guys at various points. So should be another big crowd. LSU and Ole Miss fans always come out in big numbers for this. Tennessee fans as well. We will see. All right, let's get to some of these questions here. A little bit lighter crowd today because Twitter's having issues this morning. So I think fewer folks saw this as it was going up live. I imagine a lot more folks will be watching it after the fact. So there's that. So if you can't usually get your question in, get your questions in. Austin Larroquette asked about Tennessee's hosting. We went over that. David Aaron says, have any SEC teams improved their hosting odds? I mean, Tennessee earlier in the week, Ole Miss now. Really the only team that was kind of seriously in the hosting discussion that hurt themselves, I think, is probably Alabama. I mean, their one win here was against Missouri. And the RPI is good. RPI is hanging tight at 12. Something tells me, though, that especially as Ole Miss and Tennessee have improved their odds, something tells me that it's hurt Alabama's odds. They say it doesn't work like that, but sometimes it feels like it does. That, and this isn't just true of SEC, by the way. Like, that's not an SEC, anti-SEC thing. It's, you see it sometimes with smaller conferences where like the Big East, right? Let's use that as an example, where Creighton, UConn, and Xavier are all kind of bubble-ish teams. And it seems unlikely all three are going to get in. So, somebody's going to win the auto bid, and then maybe there'll be room for one more. So then whoever gets that second bid is probably doing so at the expense of that third team, whether it's UConn and Xavier and Creighton gets left off or some other combination. So, but in this case, I think it's, with Ole Miss and Tennessee having really helped themselves, I just think they've at a bare minimum leapfrogged ahead of Alabama in the pecking order, and that could be just enough justification for Alabama to get left out in terms of hosting. David also says Ole Miss versus Georgia Tech will be an interesting discussion. Yeah, that's part of the crux of the piece that Chase wrote, is just that Georgia Tech has been a name that has been bandied about as kind of in competition with Ole Miss for one of those last host spots, and it is tricky because by all measures, Ole Miss's resume is stronger. Georgia Tech won the ACC, has that going for it. It also has 12 Q1 wins, and is 12-10 in those games, which is not nothing. But Ole Miss has better RPI, more quad one wins, played in a tougher conference, and Georgia Tech has that 19-11 ACC record, but played one of the softer ACC schedules. So again, like, different strokes for different folks. I like Ole Miss's case better, but I would not be shocked if it goes to Georgia Tech. And I think there's an argument for Georgia Tech. I don't think it's ridiculous, but it is a debate that's going to be had in the coming days, and we'll see what the tournaments bring. Right, it gets increasingly difficult if Georgia Tech continues to navigate the ACC tournament. So we'll see. RPS 1218 says Ole Miss for LSU feels like it may be a blowout. Ole Miss by 10 plus. I mean, with the way they're playing, sure. And you know, LSU having used their two best arms, starting pitchers, they're going to start someone else. And so, yeah, I could see that. I wouldn't predict it necessarily, but I could definitely see it. And then Tegan Kuhn's starting. Liz says Tegan Kuhn's starting for Tennessee today. And obviously plenty of experience for him, a guy who it's been up and down, but he's a freshman. But this is going to be a big spot. This is biggest start of his career, starting against Vanderbilt, semifinals of the SEC tournament. Good experience for a young pitcher, and wouldn't put it past him to give the Vols a chance to win by the time it's all said and done. All right, folks, we'll go ahead and wrap there. Appreciate you joining. Appreciate you working through myriad issues. My hotel Wi-Fi issues, Twitter not really cooperating with people this morning. I appreciate you working through all that to be here with me live. We'll be back tomorrow. We'll recap the semifinals, get you ready for the SEC tournament final. We will do that probably a little bit later in the morning than we've been doing this. It's just with early starts, you got to get this up fairly early. So, but tomorrow with a later start for the final, it'll go up a little bit later in the morning. But anyway, all right. Thank you to Academy Sports and Outdoors for sponsoring this and every Weekend Waypoints. Thank you, everybody, for joining me live this morning. I'll talk to y'all tomorrow morning. Enjoy the baseball today, everybody.